Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for watching. Guy has an update on a big hurricane threat that the models have latched onto. Alright, we're going to be talking about this for quite a while, up until the point where we can kind of just get a grip on the idea of if this storm is even going to form, and if it does form, where it's going to go. Because obviously, where it's headed is going to play a big role in just the outcome of this storm, and if anybody is going to end up being impacted by it. Alright, so take a look, just starting out here, take a look at your current satellite. We're going to look at all the models, all the major models that have been showing signs of this storm developing. So we're going to look at the GFS, the European AI, the Canadian, and the Icon. We're going to compare all four, and then we're going to talk about the GFS and European ensemble, and then we will talk about the steering currents of for the storm at the end of the video. All right, but today's video is just going to be on the tropics. We're going to leave severe weather for a separate video. And so we're just gonna put our focus onto the tropics as of right now. So here's the big picture in the Atlantic. You got two things going on right now. One, you've got the remnants of PTC 8 that is way up here into the northeast, just doing its thing, producing some light showers and storms. All right, that's moving its way up north. Not really gonna do anything that's going to mess around with the Atlantic's functioning currents and stuff. What we've got to talk about and mention is we do have the remnants of Gordon. All right, this is the remnants of Gordon. You can see it's got a little swirly look to it. All right, that's where that low pressure is. We are expecting this to have at least a shot at developing and redeveloping, actually. So it could definitely form back into Tropical Storm Gordon. So that'd be pretty interesting to see. But as of right now, we got about 50% chance of that happening. So we'll just take a brief look at that in just a bit. But as of right now, the Atlantic looks pretty quiet. I just want to switch over the satellite with the cloud view here so you can see if we do have any tropical waves. Notice how we do have some moisture moving its way towards Central America. I would watch out for this. This could definitely be associated with just all the moisture that's up in the air out here in the Caribbean, waiting for our tropical wave that's really going to kind of stir things up and really get going. We can really see some big trouble move into this general area. So that's the big picture as of right now. Everything else seems to be pretty calm at the moment, but we'll obviously continue to be on standby, watching for any tropical waves that could potentially have some development that we have to talk about. All right, so moving on here to the National Hurricane Center's homepage. As you can see right now, we have two areas of interest. Our first one being the remnants of Gordon up here in the central subtropical Atlantic. What they're saying right now is that an area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms located over the central tropical Atlantic is associated with the remnants of Gordon. This storm is forecast to interact with a non-tropical low to its northwest while moving north-northwestward at 5 to 10 miles per hour during the next couple of days. Environmental conditions could become more conducive for development later this week, and a tropical depression or storm could reform in the next few days while the system moves slowly northward over the central subtropical Atlantic. All right, so if you look at yesterday's video, we looked at satellite with all the moisture and stuff. We did see that there was a second little system, not a named storm, just a little piece of energy that was actually trying to merge together and kind of connect with the remnants of Gordon. Now, that's actually going to be helping to increase the threat of Gordon kind of reorganizing and reforming. So that's basically what's keeping this thing alive. So right now, they're putting it at about a 50% chance. They're saying right now, not really sure if this is going to develop or not. About a 50% chance, 50-50. Not a super high chance, but there also is definitely a decent chance of this thing developing. Now you look a little bit off to its west over here in the Northwest Caribbean. Right now we have a broad area of low pressure that could form late this weekend or early next week over the northwestern Caribbean Sea. So that just means that we haven't had anything form yet, not even like a tropical wave. They're just saying that based off of model runs and model guidance, there's just the threat for a big blob of moisture is all they're pretty much saying here. There's just a threat for a low pressure system, a broad area of low pressure that could form. They're not saying any tropical development or anything. So as of right now, just a broad area of low pressure could form late this weekend or early next week over the northwestern Caribbean Sea. Thereafter, some slow development of this system is possible through the middle of next week, while it moves slowly to the north or northwest over the northern Caribbean Sea or the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. All right. So as of right now, they've got it in a zone that is where we really hate to see tropical systems get to. Right now, we're expecting it to become a surface low at some point in this general area. But notice how the shape of it kind of does kind of resembles the potential cone, if you will, of this storm. So imagining that this had a cone, a path, the path would be going in the general direction of the Gulf of Mexico. And right now, the Gulf of Mexico absolutely loaded with SSTs. You've got record-breaking SSTs out there, and then you've also got a lot of moisture, which is pretty specific. So you put those two things together, and also with the limited wind shear, which, by the way, there is very limited wind shear. When I mean very limited wind shear, I mean very limited wind shear. So right now, all I gotta say is that the setup for tropical development is prime time. It's a prime time environment, so that's why we have to keep our eyes peeled for anything the models are picking up on as far as this region of the Atlantic goes. So we're going to talk about the GFS, the European AI model, the Canadian, and the Icon. We're going to compare all four. We're going to start with the GFS. So what is the GFS showing with this storm? Well, you take this out a little bit farther, and you just see a lot of moisture kind of settle down here in the southern Caribbean. All right, and you see what happens with it. Keeps going. We're getting into Monday of next week. So we've went all the way throughout the weekend. Don't have a low-pressure signature, but you do have a blob of green. That's all I gotta say. You've got a blob of green here, just a lot of moisture in the same general area as the area of interest that was put out by the National Hurricane Center. It's pretty much the same exact area, all right? So that is a signature for a potential tropical, moisture, a big blob of tropical moisture. That's all this is. Take this out later into next week. We'll take this out all the way to Tuesday. This is Tuesday morning, I believe, or Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. All right, you finally do have a 1,004 millibar low. All right, it's just to the east of the Yucatan Peninsula, and you've just got a huge area of moisture here. All this green you see here, all these reds, these oranges, these purples. All right, if this were on a satellite, if you looked at a satellite for this exact frame here, this would probably just look like a tropical wave producing disorganized showers and thunderstorms. That's all this is. But this does have a 1,004 millibar low, and it's trying to get access to the Gulf of Mexico. So we take this out a little bit farther into next week, and boom. Look at this. It gets its hands on the Gulf of Mexico, really starts to become more compact. All right, it's still a very, very large system. You can see these isobars are going around the storm. They are rotating around the center. So obviously not tornado rotation, but that is circulation for tropical cyclones. And you do get a strengthening low. Now this is down to a 994 millibar low, and it's pretty much right in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. It's got all access to the Gulf of Mexico. Just kind of has to ride with the pattern, and we'll see how long it stays over waters. And it does continue to strengthen. All right, not too much at this point, which is interesting because if you look at the GFS run from even yesterday, but days before, almost every run had this getting at least sub 950, which you could argue is at least a major hurricane. A lot of them had this getting down to a Category 4, even up to a Category 5. All right, so big difference in what we've seen. The GFS trending now to a much weaker scenario, which is good, but we still do see a tropical cyclone. This is not sub 990, so you wouldn't really be able to call it a hurricane yet. It does look like, though, a tropical storm for sure. Mid to high tropical storm, bearing down on either the Florida Panhandle or anywhere else on the eastern half of the Gulf Coast. We take this a little bit further. It slows down as it's over water, so that does give it a little bit more time to develop. And boom, it kind of just makes a landfall right in the Big Bend region as a 987 millibar hurricane. Probably a Category 1 hurricane, maybe just a very high-end tropical storm. It does something a little weird after this, all right? GFS has been ticking farther east, and a lot of models have been too. So you see what the track has looked like as of right now. That's what the track is looking like. Very, very similar to Debbie. Debbie was a little bit further north. It stayed over land a little bit more. So you could see just a little bit farther south than where Debbie made landfall. Now it's back over waters. Now it's in the rest of the southwestern Atlantic. It's north of the Bahamas, now off the coast of Florida. Now, remember, these sea surface temperatures are still very, very high, very, very warm. So because this is still technically what looks to me like a hurricane or a high-end tropical storm, it still definitely has time to strengthen, and that's exactly what it does. It almost stalls out completely. It slows down a lot. And this is over 250 hours out. So take this with a grain of salt. This is not a forecast. This is not official, but this is what the GFS is showing. The signal for this to make a landfall, then come back offshore, which we've seen this happen before. We saw this happen with Debbie. And it wants us to re-strengthen, which it seems pretty crazy. And yes, I can admit it is. But I think it's possible because, I mean, just with the, high sea surface temperatures that we got out here, and then obviously with the potential for very, very limited wind shear, I think it's certainly possible for this storm to do what the GFS is showing. But man, the GFS is being aggressive with this, because look what happens. It pretty much just stops for a whole good half a day to a day, and then begins to make its turn north, and it goes pretty much from pretty much near 990 millibar low down to a 961 in just over 24 hours. So very strong rapid intensification that we see here. It's completely off the coast here of the Carolinas, Georgia, the southeast here. It's a very big hurricane. Now you've got a huge hurricane that just is looming offshore. This is now a beast of a hurricane just offshore, and you've already had one landfall with this. So I'm not saying that this is impossible to happen. I just think that this is a very, very interesting run of the GFS, and I think just this model run has gotten caught up in all the model trends pushing the storm off to the east a little bit, to the point where it's just doing something weird. That's the sense I'm getting, because the GFS really has a hard time with long-range tropical system forecasting. But we change this over here to the eastern U.S. To get a look at the storm. See what else it does beyond this. It actually is now down to a 957 millibar low. And so this is just a super strong storm. And bam, 950. So look what happens here. As this moves north, it actually goes into what looks like warmer waters. And you get a 950 millibar low. Now, almost 300 hours out. This is almost 2 weeks out. This is like a week and a half out. This is so far out. Take this with a grain of salt. This basically just gives us a general idea of where the latest model runs are kind of putting this storm. Because remember, we're not looking for the exact details. We're just looking basically if this storm is going to fall in between this area. You don't know how broad this is. This is a very broad area. So we're basically splitting the Gulf of Mexico in half and trying to decide if this storm is even going to form, and if it does, will it hit the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico, or is it going to go for areas like Texas and Louisiana? That's what we need to figure out, and that's why we're, showing this to kind of just, get a sense of what the latest model runs are showing. So you get a 950 millibar low. This is a beast of a hurricane, high-end Cat 2. I mean, this is not even a high-end Cat 2. This is a mid to high Cat 3 even, and this is looming offshore, just bring a touch of rain to the Outer Banks. Hasn't made a landfall yet. Look at this trough that's coming through. You get a serious dip in the jet stream. We haven't made it to October yet. This is September 30th. This is a very, very significant dip in the jet stream. This is part of the polar vortex that's making it all the way down in the United States already by October 1st, so the beginning of October. So you already know this is a big trough moving through, because look at all this rain. This is not related to our potential hurricane. This is not related to our storm. This is just a trough that's moving through, and what we see here is that the trough just kind of picks up the storm and brings it a little bit farther to the east, and it kind of gets just caught up in the trough and makes a landfall in Nova Scotia. So pretty wild stuff from the GFS. 60 run looks a little similar. You look for the trough and you do get it. You also do get a similar, landfalling hurricane here in the southeast. Looks pretty much the same, a little bit farther north though here. And if I can erase what I've got scribbling on my screen, you can see here, this is a 990 millibar low, does its slowing down thing, and kind of just makes that landfall here in Florida, a little bit farther to the north, a little bit farther to the west. Just brings a ton of rainfall out there, and then it moves on north and brings all that moisture up through the southeast. And it's interesting because it's such a broad system that the GFS has been bringing this up the east coast, but with just still so much rain, even as it gets to the northeast, because of just how much moisture is packed into it by the time it makes landfall into Florida. And we do get some sort of trough that kind of picks this up and brings it farther north. So that's what we see from the GFS. Now we turn this over to the European AI model, which is pretty interesting, but I do think it's done a great job picking up at least on a signal for the storm. It's been consistently doing this. It's not done anything too crazy. It's pretty conservative, but it is still showing a hurricane. So you see what happens with this. All right, a little bit later here, still by Wednesday though. So actually, kind of similar to what the GFS was showing. You can see we have a 1,005 millibar low, super broad here. Looks like it's going right over towards the Yucatan Peninsula, but all of this moisture is kind of just built into the storm, and you can see the isobars are circulating around the center, meaning that we do have some slight circulation with the storm. This is a rotating cyclone, all right, that is starting to form. And you take this out to farther into next week. This is already by Thursday, so this is exactly a week out from now. This makes it past the Bay of Campeche, makes it past the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, this is actually in the western side of the Gulf of Mexico. So, a little bit of a different scenario there for the GFS. Remember, we split the Gulf of Mexico in half. This is the eastern side. This is the western side. Now, this goes through a little bit farther to the west, goes through the Yucatan Peninsula. Now it's in the western Gulf of Mexico. All right, well, what does it do from there? Well, by Thursday of next week, it's a 998 millibar low. After that, this starts to really, soak up those warm SSTs and zoom into the southeast. And this is really starting to slow down. So that's going to bring this over waters a little bit longer, giving it the time to strengthen. And it just brings a absolute plume of moisture farther north. If this scenario were to play out, you would get dumped on if you're out here on the Texas, Louisiana coastline, if you're in the south central United States like the Dixie Alley, and it starts to turn north. All right, you see this already by Saturday, so a little bit it's like a week and 3 days out, a week and 2 days out. This makes a landfall in Texas, in between Texas and Louisiana, as a 973 millibar low, actually a little bit stronger than that, 968 millibar low, so probably a high-end Cat 2, low-end Cat 3 scenario that we get here. You just get an absolute shield of rainfall on the north side of the storm, very, very strong, very tightly packed, and very organized isobars. So that's a pretty aggressive signature there from the European AI model that we definitely have a big signal for a strong hurricane. So we do see the western half of the Gulf of Mexico become impacted. We do look for that trough in the northeast. So we look at the eastern United States, and you don't get it, all right? You do get, I will say, there is a piece of energy here riding the jet stream. You get a very big ridge that's actually in the eastern United States, unrelated to the GFS. The GFS did not have this ridge at all. The GFS, matter of fact, had a strong trough with a dip in the jet stream. Completely opposite here on the European AI model, so there's nothing that it can really latch onto, so it just kind of floats north. It's such a strong system, though, that it's still a 986 millibar low, somehow even into central Illinois, and it does connect with this piece of energy, which does look like it's associated with the trough, because you do get this dip in the jet stream, this kind of burst of cold air. Once again, take this with a grain of salt. Over 300 hours out, we're already forecasting, or not even forecasting, I should not say forecasting, but we are looking all the way into October for this, so very, very far out, but it just looks like it explodes over the eastern United States, gets caught up in our jet stream pattern, and then pretty much that's that, and it just brings a heck ton of rainfall. I mean, oh my gosh, that is a monstrous storm system here. Look at that. I mean, you're getting rain from it all the way down in Florida when you're also getting rain up into Canada. I mean, when do you see that? You very rarely see that with even the strongest of winter storms. Excuse me. All right, but that's what the European AI model is showing, and we quickly breeze through the OZ run of that. I want to look at the OOZ run just briefly. And you can see it does also show a tropical system. Now, it doesn't start off as strong, but it does slow down, and it does actually end up impacting the western side of the Gulf of Mexico. And we end off the run, so this is a little bit of a later time frame for this. We end off the run with a 973 millibar low, just sitting in the west central Gulf of Mexico. That's pretty similar, actually, to what the 60 run is for this storm. That's actually almost identical to it. So pretty interesting there with that agreement. Just very, very different on the timing of this system, and then you do actually get a pretty good trough that just, brings the system farther east, and you can see that pretty much this is how the storm and just the rest of its life would play out. So we move on here to the Canadian model. Now, what the Canadian model is showing is it has been picking up on the signal, for a potential tropical cyclone. And it has been showing some of the runs on the Canadian model have actually been showing some stronger systems. So we'll take a look at this. But basically, what you've got is you've got your big batch of tropical moisture. I apologize about my voice. All right, I've been dealing with a cough, dealing with sickness here, trying to get over a cold. So I apologize if it sounds a little raspy. So just bear with me here. But you can see the Canadian model bring this low pressure system basically through the Western Caribbean, and it does strengthen a little bit farther to the east, which is interesting because the GFS and the European AI model were showing this storm really getting its act together all the way up here into the southern Gulf of Mexico. Now you already do have a sub 1,000 millibar low south of the Bay of Campeche. So it's interesting to see that from the Canadian, how it's actually a little bit more earlier where we get that intensification where the storm really starts to wrap up. And that could be a sign that the Canadian model is actually going to bring this bring this up to a stronger status here. And we do see that as this makes its way to the Gulf of Mexico as a 979 millibar low, and it's starting to turn west. So there it is. You've got the GFS showing a hurricane hitting the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico. Now you've got the European AI and the Canadian model, at least for the Canadian, ticking farther west. If I said the GFS was ticking farther west, I mean the GFS was hitting the east half of the Gulf of Mexico, European, and what seems to be the Canadian model hitting the western half. So we take this a little bit farther. This is by Wednesday, so a little bit earlier timing for the storm to really get its act together, because remember the GFS and European model both had this farther south, the European AI model. But you take this a little bit farther into next week, and we get this out to Thursday, so this is just a week out. You have a 977 millibar low, very strong hurricane, Cat 1, Cat 2, looking to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle, or just somewhere, on the Dixie Alley coastline, or basically just the Gulf Coast. And boom, you get a landfall here. This is about a 973 millibar low, so probably a mid to high end Category 2 hurricane. And it kind of just, brings all the moisture up into the southeast. Notice how these isobars, once again, very tightly packed. This would bring very high winds and very heavy rainfall. But all of the models are showing a very, very large system, meaning that this would definitely bring a lot of rainfall. So rainfall it could be a very big concern for the storm if it does end up forming. Now, we still don't know if it's going to form. But the Canadian model brings us into the Northeast, just like every model that we've looked at has shown. So the Northeast, also be on standby. This storm could definitely end up going up to you guys, and we look for that trough, and we do get it. Boom, there it is. You get a trough that ejects across the northern and eastern United States, and storm gets pretty much caught up right into it and moves north. All right, brings a lot of moisture, a lot of rainfall, and most likely some very high winds up into the Northeast by the time we get to about the 26th to the 28th of September. So, GFS, European AI, and the Canadian both showing a landfalling hurricane somewhere in the United States, all showing the storm ending up somewhere near the northeastern United States. Okay, the Canadian model and the GFS pretty much centering a eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico getting hit by the storm, and the European AI model showing the western half of the Gulf of Mexico getting hit by the storm. Timing for this, it's very different. It's varying from all the models. So there's a lot of model disagreement, but all we can say right now is that there is a big signal from all the models that this could definitely be a strong tropical cyclone, potentially even a hurricane. So we move on here to the Icon model. That's the final model that we're going to be comparing for this storm. So we'll switch this over to the Western Atlantic to get a closer look here. So you can see it just got a lot of moisture down here in the Caribbean. And we take this out a little bit further. and it takes a very, very long time for this thing to develop. Notice that. That's been the case for all of these model runs. And you finally get your low pressure here, 1,005 millibars by the time we get into about um, Monday of next week, I believe this is. And so we take this out a little bit farther, get this into Tuesday, and then here's Wednesday. This makes a technical landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula and gets into the Bay of Campeche, and it pretty much takes over the Gulf of Mexico. And there you go, it's in the center of the Gulf of Mexico. So once again, another storm system having the potential to do something in the Gulf of Mexico. The icon only goes out 180 hours, so we don't get that much coverage of the storm, but you can see the last frame does end with a 993 millibar low in the center of the Gulf of Mexico, and it does appear to be getting it getting sucked up in this big trough that we got, major trough out here in the eastern United States. So basically, if you were to continue this run, you'd probably end up seeing a Category 1, Category 2 landfall somewhere on the Florida Panhandle, and then basically the storm just moving up in the northeast after that. All right. So all you gotta take away from those mall runs and just comparing them is that they're all showing a very, very concerning, very big signal for a potential hurricane as we get into late September. All right, they're all showing a hurricane landfalling somewhere on the Gulf of Mexico and continuing to move into the northeast. That's gonna be a big thing that we're gonna have to focus on as we go a little bit farther into time, and then we're just going to have to continue to watch what each and every model is showing for not only just the precipitation map that we look at usually, but also for the steering currents, because we could see definitely some trends that could force some other models bring the storm farther to the east or west. We just have to wait and see. All right, so we move over here to the GFS ensemble run. All right, we look at the GFS ensemble to basically just look at what the members are showing for our low pressure tracks. These are our spaghetti models. That's what we like to call them here in the weather community. And you can see the majority of them, a lot of them, bring this to the east. This looked so much different even yesterday, but 2 days ago, this looked completely different as you had model runs spreading out everywhere. The members were going over to the west, they were going north, they were going east. Now they looked a little bit more tight. And actually I should say much more tight, but they look much more compact rather than what we saw 2 days ago where they were just all over the place. So you can see all of them, pretty much the majority of them, taking this into Florida. Now, even Louisiana and sections of, the Louisiana and sections of the Alabama and Mississippi coastline, none of these members bring the storm into those coastlines. All of the members bring this into Florida, which is concerning for Florida. But that's a very big trend that this storm is going to be moving to the east based off what the GFS is showing. And if it would continue seeing these tracks, they would probably go up the east coast and into the northeast. And we just see a very, very big signal from the GFS that this storm is going to impact somewhere around Florida and end up going up the east coast and just a little bit further to the east than the other models. So that's a big thing to take away from the GFS ensemble. But this is very interesting that I'm seeing here. Very interesting, trend that we're seeing. This model run trending east. All right, so we'll continue to watch the ensemble runs. We'll take a look at what they're looking like as of tomorrow, but obviously we'll keep an eye on this. This is interesting to see, but it's also concerning because if you get a storm going up the East Coast, there's a lot of question marks that lay with that scenario as well. So we look at now the European ensemble. Now the European ensemble only goes out 240 hours, so we don't get as many members with this. But you do get a lot of members that show up for the storm. They do bring the storm all into the Gulf of Mexico. A lot more spread out there. You get a few members that take this up into Florida, and then quite a few more members that actually bring this into the central Gulf of Mexico that would probably continue their tracks somewhere like this. So we'll continue watching, obviously, the European ensemble runs as we continue to get a little bit more coverage from the model because obviously it only goes out 240 hours. All right, but obviously, just gotta keep watching the trends here. Gotta keep watching the GFS, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So, that's going to take care of the comparing the model runs and comparing the ensemble runs. Now we need to look at the steering currents for this storm. Potentially, what kind of atmospheric conditions are going to steer, what direction these atmospheric conditions are going to steer the storm in. So you look at the GFS for this, and you can see we have a lot of high pressure in the Caribbean, but the storm is getting strong enough to the point where it's fighting off that high pressure, and it does. Actually, the high pressure retreats farther south and farther to the west of the system, and you just get a lot of moisture that's out here and a lot of low pressure, and the system really can move freely without having to worry about any ridging or any high pressure. And boom, here it is. It's starting to strengthen a lot, and we switch this over to the take a look at the eastern United States. You can see you do have a little bit of high pressure that's keeping this, blocking it from going too far out to sea. Now remember, this run of the GFS has the storm going into Florida and then up the East Coast like this. So you still need to keep an eye on how the storm is going to react to that high pressure if this scenario were to play out. But here's your trough, digging down through the Great Lakes region. This is lining up just in time to pick up the storm for when it actually does end up, moving into the northeast. Now, this particular trough does die out because you get a big ridge, a big, mean, bold ridge that sets up here across the east central United States that tries to push the storm out to sea. This tries to block the storm from impacting the United States, which would be good. But then this kind of falls apart, and you get another trough that swings down from the from Canada, and all of a sudden you get a big pattern flip. Now you've got high pressure in the western U.S. with a big dip in the jet stream, and now you've got a trough that's swinging over to the east, and it's going to be able to pick up the storm and bring it inland, bring it with it, because that's what troughs do. And we take this out a little bit further, and this is exactly what happens. This trough actually expands and really starts to get very strong. And here you can already see on these isobars how it almost looks like the isobars are picking up the storm, kind of grasping it and then pulling it north. That's exactly what's happening here, and that's what could potentially pull the storm into the northeast if we were to see the storm emerge off the coast of Florida and the southeast. And pretty much the rest is history. So that's what we see. And this trough gets very strong. If this scenario were to play out, where we get a very strong trough like this, I mean, this is maxing out the scale here. This is 5 millibars below average here for height anomalies. That's considered super strong. So mega trough ejection here across the eastern United States. Get a storm offshore, it's going to go right directly into that trough. You already know it. And that kind of, brings the storm up into Canada and way up north. So pretty interesting to see how the steering currents are going to work with this storm. We'll have to continue to watch this very, very closely, because this is going to determine hugely on just the outcome of this storm and where it's going to go. You can see like kind of similar pattern happening here, kind of similar setup on the 60 run, just everything functions a little bit farther to the west, and everything does appear to be a little bit weaker because this system is weaker, and just it shows a little bit more of a weaker trough. So we'll continue to watch that. And for the last part of the update, we're going to take a look here at the GFS for our 200 millibar winds here, and we're just going to basically look at our jet stream winds and our jet stream pattern to give you a sense of what the jet stream could potentially look like for when that trough moves through. So look at this here. You already do have a trough that's very negatively tilted. I believe this is negatively tilted. All right, look at this big ridge that's forming here in the western United States. That's going to allow for some cold air, some deep cold air, and some troughs to move down from Canada into the northeast. That's this kind of pattern and setup that's going to allow for the storm to be picked up and thrown into the northeast. That's the signal that the models have all been picking up on, not only GFS, but the European AI, the Canadian, and the Icon, all showing that potential scenario happening. And you get a very, very deep trough, but the storm hasn't formed quite yet. But you still hang on to that pattern, because you still got a huge ridge that's building over the western United States, and that pretty much makes room for a second trough to move through. Now the jet stream becomes amplified, and we turn over from basically a zonal flow to a very, very active pattern, which, by the way, this will definitely increase the potential for severe weather, which we'll leave for a separate video. We have to talk about how this pattern with this many dips in the jet stream and just also a very strong jet stream, this upcoming pattern is going to be very favorable for severe weather. So we have to mention that. All right, but here comes your big trough. This is your dip in the jet stream, and boom, look at this. I mean, take in this setup. You have a massive ridge forming in the west. You're getting a lot of moisture and warm air surging into the western United States. This is all from the Pacific Ocean. Look at this huge dip in the jet stream. I mean, this is abnormal. This is not normal for September. All right, this is super far out. So a big single, but for this to play out, this would be a very, very dangerous setup, because not only are you going to get this hurricane moving up into the northeast, but you're also going to get a very strong storm system that's going to be associated with this very strong trough. And when you have 200 millibar wind speeds, when you have jet stream winds that are over 115 knots out here, approaching 120, 140 knots, you are getting extremely strong damaging winds. So this is how the jet stream works. You get a huge bump up farther north, and then look at this dip in the jet stream. That's how the jet stream would kind of play out like this. All right, but you would have serious winds to talk about, and this would just be a very dangerous setup for not only areas impacted by this hurricane, but also areas just impacted by severe weather and this potential trough that could move through. So that's pretty much what you get out here, and that's what you saw on the 500 millibar height anomalies. This is what's causing that massive mega trough. I mean, look at it. It literally looks like it's a bomb exploding, but a huge storm system, huge potential here, big pattern coming up, and boy, that hurricane, potential tropical cyclone, whatever it's going to be, it is going to be a nuisance to the United States, and we need to keep our eyes on it. Alright, so that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for coming to watch. I'll see you guys in the next video. So stay tuned. I will continue to pump out updates as much as I can, as frequent as I can, for this system, but also for severe weather, because this pattern does look very favorable for severe weather. So we'll get back into the swing of things. I know it took a slight break from making updates, but I'll be sure to get right back into it. And yeah, that's all I got. So thank you for coming to watch, and I'll see you guys next video.